Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. On this podcast, we are normally watching a TV series week to week, providing you some companionship and some insight along the way, hopefully. On today's episode, a few different topics that we'll be covering. Firstly, a little preview of Alien Earth, the new series we'll be covering week to week, starting this Wednesday. Then a breakdown of the most recent episode of Smoke. We're just 1 week away from the finale. Quite some intense scenes in this particular episode and some shocking plot twists. If you're behind on the show and are even mildly entertained by what you've seen so far, the show gets significantly better towards the end of its run. The last 2 episodes at least have been very strong. So here's a time to perhaps catch up on it. And I'll be breaking that episode down by myself. I'm pre-recording this because a couple of reasons. I'll actually be traveling this week. And secondly, I want to reserve the limited amount of time I have to talk to Darren to discuss the new, very rare thing that we see, a horror blockbuster not based on any kind of existing IP, the movie Weapons, which we'll be breaking down, discussing, and spoiling here as well. A spoiler-free review before we get into full spoilers, so I will definitely warn you when we get to that point in the conversation. Just a little peek behind the curtain. I always forget to introduce myself, so a little, since I have this space, just to let you know, I'm your host, Victor. This is not my profession, by the way. This is just a hobby for me, but I very much enjoy it and mostly enjoy the connections I've made with some of you via email, social media, etc. So love hearing your feedback. If you ever want to send an email, I always respond, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com. It might take a little while. I responded to someone, by the way, if you're listening right now, responded to someone, Ian, very quickly because I happened to open my email just as he emailed me. So we went back and forth nearly in real time. Sometimes it takes me quite a while to respond, especially if I'm not always checking all the different apps. For example, very conveniently, Spotify. If you listen to us on Spotify, you can leave a comment and I can respond there as well. And I've missed a few comments there, but have eventually commented back. So if you have reached out to me there, I will do a better job of staying on top of that. Of course, via YouTube as well. A lot of activity on our YouTube channel by our standards. We always love listening to you. I share your feedback with Sona or Darren, depending on the conversation. And honestly, I usually don't have this little space to even have this 2 or 3 minutes to introduce myself and discuss what's going on in the production of the series, because this is not my job. So honestly, it's usually me recording between meetings or family activities and trying to coordinate things with Darren or Sona, of course, who also have families of their own and also do not do this professionally. All that is to say that I just wanted to have this moment to speak to all of you about that and to mention that I appreciate, of course, that everybody listens to us here on the podcast. I personally began this podcast during the pandemic as a way to stay in touch with friends. It turned out most of my friends did not want to talk on microphone, but Sona did. And of course, some other folks you may have seen dip in and out, other participants in this conversation when it works for them. And of course, another pleasure was meeting Darren. Darren was a fan of the show. We started emailing back and forth. I realized at one point, based on his email address, that he followed me on Letterboxd. And now he co-hosts oftentimes on this podcast as well. And I personally, as a philosophy here in the podcast, I get exhausted with the memification of social media reactions, which I enjoy a funny meme as much as anybody else, but it oftentimes feels like all the discourse about everything, especially pop culture, which you may be interacting with very transactionally. And I just find it honestly kind of exhausting. I prefer a longer form type conversation or analysis of the things I'm watching, even if it's in a playful tone. And that's why I like podcasts, and that's why I started this podcast. So hopefully you appreciate those things as well. And anyone who is listening to this, if you would like to join a Slack channel where you can communicate with us and with other fans of the show, I'm sure this is not something that's going to appeal to a large number of you, but if you're curious, do email me, needssomeintroduction@gmail.com, and I can send you that link so you can participate in the conversation or just read what other people are posting. Or of course, if you prefer, through whatever social media channels you prefer. I'm just trying to find a platform where maybe everybody can communicate if they choose to. Okay, with that out of the way, topic number one, and do check the show notes, by the way. We're going to be covering a few different topics here. So if you're only interested in the weapons review, for example, there's always timestamps in the show notes. for these episodes has been the case for about a year now. When we do cover multiple topics, obviously, especially useful to use those timestamps in the show notes. Topic number 1. So, Alien Earth. This is from FX on Hulu. I actually just had to go and double check that on the internet. It is indeed available on Hulu and on FX, on the television network FX, if you have it, depending on your territory, at the same time, on Tuesday night, Eastern Time in the US. Some places overseas, this will be on Disney Plus directly, where Hulu is branded as Disney Plus or vice versa. And I did want to shout that out because there are this whole FX on Hulu brand where it's only available on Hulu, although produced by FX. FX, the network, available on the TV network as well as Hulu. This comes from Noah Hawley, who most famously is the showrunner for the Fargo TV series, the anthology TV series. A very uneven series of television. Some seasons truly exceptional, some seasons not so great. The most recent season, for most of its runtime, I thought was exceptional. Didn't quite land where I wanted it to, but most of the way through, very strong this most recent season. And we will see more in the future. And also the showrunner for the FX series Legion, which, speaking of uneven, that show is such a frustrating watch for me personally, but also has some extraordinary individual episodes. So given that pedigree, obviously he's done science fiction before in the form of Legion, and even toyed with science fiction elements to the Fargo show itself. But this is by far the most elaborate and expensive project that he's ever worked on. He's made some movies as well, which have not done very well, but he's very ambitious, so very interesting. I've read some of his books as well. He's also an author, and always very ambitious, but not always successful. Like Legion's a perfect example of where I might worry about what he's going to bring to the Alien Earth series, a series that is very interested in the themes about humanity's place in the natural world, in the risks of AI, in the risks of blind capitalism, big ideas that are all seated very quietly in a horror genre, basically, of the first Alien film, but have expanded sometimes to the detriment of the series itself. And I have an episode here in the feed, by the way, if you want to track it down. A very popular episode. I'm not actually certain why that episode took off the way it did last summer when I covered the Alien series and reviewed Alien Romulus, a film that I like very much, by the way, if you haven't caught up on that one. Very bare bones, taking it back to its horror and action origins, but still with the same thematics of the risks of capitalism, AI, etc. So this series has definitely gone off the rails multiple times, whether it's Alien Resurrection and some of the bizarre turns that happen in that particular very strange film, but then going in another direction with Prometheus, for example, Ridley Scott coming back to the franchise, and a very convoluted, overly complicated, very philosophical, but just a mashup of trying to be a horror film, trying to be an action film, trying to be this treatise on the origin of man. And honestly, I think not doing all of those things that well, or any of them. All that is to say, I'm very curious to see Alien Earth, and concerned at the same time. Well, the reviews have started coming in, and critics have seen, I think most critics have only seen the first 2 episodes, although some may have seen more of the season. And the early reaction is quite enthusiastic. The setup for the show is that there is a procedure in the future in which consciousness can be transferred from a person into an android body. And we meet a young girl, Marcy, who's dying of brain cancer, but chooses to undergo this procedure before she dies, and is transferred into the body of Wendy, as she's called, a reference to Peter Pan, by the way. All the characters in this squad of android soldiers are named after characters in Peter Pan. Wendy's played by Sydney Chandler, who's appeared in a few things that we've discussed here on the podcast. Pistol, the Danny Boyle Sex Pistols miniseries, the science fiction series Sugar, which is coming back for a second season. Amazingly, by the way, not a popular series, but somehow coming back for a second season. Don't Worry, Darling, just to name a few things we've discussed here on the podcast. And by the way, Kyle Chandler's daughter. And these lost boys and girl get recruited when a ship from space crashes into Earth. And when you know it, even though, by the way, just for those who are nitpickers about the philosophy or the chronology of the Alien series, this takes place before the first Alien film, just a few years before. I assume that This will be an alternate origin to the alien mythology. Curious to see how that all plays out. This ship crashes, and it has a xenomorph on it, and other things too that we haven't seen before in the alien universe. This ship crash lands. These consciousness transferred humans are actually different from the fully synthetic characters we've seen in the alien films throughout their entire run. One of the leads of this group of android soldiers is a fully synthetic character played by Timothy Oliphant, who always great to see in anything, by the way, but looking with white eyebrows, looking very strikingly weird in this particular show. Well, when this ship crash lands on Earth, two different companies, of course, Weyland Yutani, goes to investigate to see if they can harvest whatever came back on that ship. Little do they know the can of worms they're about to open. And a competing company, the company that makes these consciousness transferred humans, decides to also converge on the location to see if they can get there first and win this competition for whatever IP might have come back on that ship. And among those other investigators, a character called Hermit, who happens to be Wendy's long-lost brother. So a family reunion as part of the impetus for her investigation of that crash site. So that's the setup of the show. That's as far as I know. You can suss most of this out, or this will make sense if you watch the trailer in retrospect. The trailer does not spoil too much, so I did try to avoid the trailer at first, did watch it in preparation for this. I haven't seen the most recent trailer, so maybe there's more spoilers there, but in the initial teaser trailer, relatively few spoilers. And according to Howley himself, he very much wanted to marry the action of Aliens, the truly excellent James Cameron sequel to Alien, with some of the philosophical weight that Prometheus tried to inject into the series as well, directly addressing some of the subtext of the previous films. And for people who've seen this show, they say it does an excellent job of doing that. So I am very excited, cannot wait. So I hope you join us for the ride. Darren will be my co-host for those episodes, and we'll be covering episodes 1 and 2 this upcoming Wednesday. Okay, topic number 2. The 8th episode, the penultimate episode of this one and only season, there's no chance this is coming back for another season, of Smoke, an episode called Mercy. Firstly, regarding last week's episode, Whitewashed Tombs, I did hear from a couple of different people via YouTube and email, and maybe even through Spotify conversations as well. I had not researched Whitewashed Tombs, but when Darren brought it up, I did immediately after our conversation look it up and did locate this quote, which is from the Bible. Thank you for everybody who mentioned it to us as well. Matthew 23, 27, 28. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. So, of course, Freddie only mentions the whitewashed tombs, but more importantly is almost to read the entire quote and think about the hypocrisy, where you present yourself one way, but you are the hypocrite. You are full of evil, wickedness, and hypocrisy. You present yourself as the hero. Of course, this is directly referencing Dave's character and these two persona. He is the investigator. He's the one who solves the crime. He's the one who saves people. He's the one who sets the fire. The hypocrisy of that, of not only being the fire setter, but supposedly the hero as well. And of course, that hypocrisy is in full bloom and called out multiple times in this very episode of the show. As I mentioned, this episode is called Mercy, and there is very little mercy to be found in this particular episode. But of course, mercy references the true identity of one of the characters here in the series. As always is the case in this series, of course, we start off with a definition: fury, unrestrained or violent anger. As the episode begins, we see multiple aspects of fury here. Dave furiously goes and makes a bunch of incendiary devices and sets 6 fires that night. Back at the police station, we see that Stephen Burke, the Rafe Spall character, is furious. They have screwed up. He's placing the blame on everybody else, kind of neglecting the fact that he just sucker punched this guy. And of course, if that's not a dead giveaway that you're not on this guy's side anymore, I'm not sure what is. And he's warning them, we're about to be taken away from this case, or this case is about to be taken away from us, I should say, because we have screwed up. And as everybody's freaking out, the show still has time for a little bit of comedy here. because Dave wanders into work, shows up for work the next day after setting all those fires the night before. But before he gets there, he does get to fantasize about setting his current wife on fire while she's sitting at breakfast with her son. She finally admits to her son, by the way, that Dave indeed is a creep, just like you predicted, and he's dangerous, and that's why she's sending him away to be with his dad. A little foreshadowing here, since we don't see her again for the rest of the episode. I wouldn't be surprised if Dave is indeed going to set one more big fire before the season is over, and if his target is going to be his wife. Of course, after this, as I mentioned, Dave actually heads into work, and they get that news from Harvey, the Greg Kinnear character. Harvey's daughter is visiting him here at the office, and there was some confusion last week. What was the whole thing with that lake house photograph? Why did Dave look at it? Why did he break it? I was thinking, like, is this something that he always fantasized about having, a lake house? Is that where he was maybe headed? Actually, it turns out that Harvey paid for that lake house by embezzling money from the fire department. He's telling his daughter this whole story, and he mentions, well, I told them the bathroom repair was going to be $10,000 or $15,000, I forget what the number was. I asked for $5,000 more, and then I took that $5,000, and that's what's eating away at him. And she says, Dad, I have $5,000. I can help you out, And he goes, actually, it's $260,000 because when I took the $5,000 and nobody noticed, I just kept taking it. But you know who knew? Dave. Harv. Why are you telling Dave this? Why would anyone trust Dave at all? And by smashing that picture, Dave is sending a signal to the captain. If I go down, you're going down too. Calderon shows up at the office, and this is really interesting the way this is written. I believe this episode was written by, or primarily written by, Lehane himself. And I have been looking at the writing credits. They obviously have a writer's room, but the episodes that are primarily or exclusively credited as written by Dennis Lehane do seem to be the best episodes of the season, by the way. And this cat and mouse, we just talked about cats and mouse with the Dexter recap, but this cat and mouse is really intriguing. Calderon showing up, playing coyly that, well, the reason I was uncomfortable with you isn't because I know what you did, which of course he knows all of this. So they're playing this lying to each other in plain sight, and she's creating a separate uncomfortable fact that the way you presented me in the book, which I read, made me uncomfortable. And Edgerton's actually really interesting in this role. It's almost like he becomes apologetic, a little embarrassed there. Not that apologetic, though, when she complains that they hooked up in the back seat of the car. He goes, would you have preferred it in the front seat of the car? But even though there's this tone where he tries to make amends momentarily, it gets ugly when he basically accuses her of being purely transactional. She says, are you calling me a whore? And he is getting in her head, trying to, and this is what he keeps doing throughout the course of the episode, is pushing people, pushing their buttons. And he's going to push a much bigger button for her later this episode. She, by the way, is wearing a wire. So the whole conversation about her having screwed her boss to potentially advance in her career, we cut to him hearing this information, which A, is weighing on him, obviously, and B, is being heard by everybody else in that room. And of course, there's the rumor, so he knows everybody there knows exactly what that conversation's about. Awkward, to say the least. They go out for the rest of the day investigating this string of fires. Who could have possibly set these fires? Oh, I don't think this was an accident. I think this fire might have had a different origin point outside. Oh, look, the coin. All that's left in this incendiary device is the coin. What a strange coincidence. Oh, it's filterless cigarettes now, so there won't be any DNA on these filters. I wonder how he had all this information. And of course, this is all a manipulation he's doing right in the open. And once again, I love this type of scene where he knows she's wearing a wire. He knows that people are listening to this conversation. He knows she's playing ignorant here, and he's playing a role as well. It's a performance for when this wire gets submitted into evidence someday in the future. Ezra, this is a dream come true for Ezra, by the way. Ezra, the John Leguizamo character, is paired up with Dawn, the ATF agent, the Anna Klumsky character. And they made a stink about the fact that he had been able to shake off the tracking device so easily. They've put 2 tracking devices now in the car, one well hidden, the other one hard to detect. Apparently, Ezra's gotten very good at this. But most of the episode is spent with Calderon and Dave. This is, and by the way, next episode, I will fill you in on the true life story if you haven't already tracked it down yourself. But this is true to the actual perpetrator of these arsons in the true story of this. Michelle calls out the fact that why had Dave, if he was such a good investigator, why didn't he become a police officer? And he says, well, it wasn't something I was interested in. But of course, she knows that he did apply to be a police. Once again, this does correlate to the real world instance. Turns out he failed, not the physical exam. He was physically fit and passed the other parts of the assessment with flying colors. However, his psychological profile got him rejected because he had a propensity for violence. He also shows a real dislike for dogs, apparently. And this is when she brings up the fact that he likes to burn dogs, because of course we know that from Ezra's revelation. Turns out there's a witness, by the way, to the fire the night before. They interrogate this witness. And again, this happens the second time in this series where somebody saw the perpetrator of the arson and kind of matches the guy in the room. But there's a camouflage when you're talking to somebody in their uniforms of authority. He is, by the way, horrible to this poor woman. And Calderon cuts this interview off short. They literally pass the rest of the investigators running inside. They only have one question for her. Have you seen that man before? Obviously, the indication that that guy is the guy you saw last night, lady. Can you put two and two together? And she says, no, I have not seen him before, and I don't know why he was so rude to me. Burke is very upset by this and storms off. And then we get to probably the best scene in the episode and one of the best in this entire series. Calderon and Dave are still hanging out together. He's picked a restaurant and he says he doesn't like the food. And she says, well, I thought you liked the food. Why would you come here? And he goes, I don't like the food. I like the view. Because it turns out that the store directly across the street, many years ago, about 20 years ago, was the motel that burned down. This is Calderon's origin story. Her mom was there with some man. Still not sure what the details are here. He implies that maybe it was some sexual transaction. Maybe he was a drug dealer. But she locked her 12-year-old daughter in the closet, killed this man, and set the house on fire. And of course, this is Michelle Calderon, or Mercy, her real name. So this fills in most of the details of what happened that night. Oh, I should mention, of course, that her mom is about to be released imminently. So all of this is weighing on her for sure, and she snaps. She tells him to take that name out of his mouth, and he says, why? Your mother gave it to you. And of course, that means more than just the name. What else did her mother give to her? Edgerton's really good in this scene. He says to her, you don't have to be scared of me. And she reacts, I'm not scared of you. You're a fire investigator who sets fires to look like a hero. Edgerton will not make eye contact with her this entire time as she's saying this. And she says, I'm not scared of you. You're a joke. And then he makes eye contact and says, then why aren't you laughing? And then our investigators split up after this. She storms off, by the way, after this, meets up with Burke. Burke and her are tracking the car, but Dave doesn't take the car. He takes the bus. I guess he assumes there's a tracker on the car. And Dawn and Ezra have followed him, even though he was on the bus. They've been following him physically. And where has he gone to? He's gone to Reba, the only friend he has left. And even though Reba warned him last week that they were onto him, she seems to regret it a little bit. She says, well, at first I thought they're accusing him of some pretty serious things. I don't believe that. And then I thought about it for a second. Maybe he is capable of this. And we see that despite the fact that he claimed she wouldn't have any scarring from that fire stunt they pulled a few episodes back. Apparently that was her. I didn't even recognize her. It's very strange. There's that whole episode. I guess we have to go back and discuss that briefly. I thought that was evidence that this was all part of his fantasy because this girl just hits on him at the convenience store. And then, of course, we find out about Reba, the ex-wife, and how they still have this ongoing sexual relationship. So then I actually did my research and says, was that her in the previous episode, just styled differently? And my research indicated it was not, because she wasn't on the credits for the previous episode. Apparently it was her. And not only that, but she has been scarred by this stunt he was pulling of burning her. I guess he let that fire burn even longer, progressively. Does her husband have questions about this burnings on her body? I have to assume that there's some problems with that marriage right now, if he hasn't noticed. Ezra and Dawn bond over how they started off in law enforcement. She has an interesting origin story. She knocked out some guy that should have been a huge physical threat to her. And when she realized that she had this innate courage and I guess lack of fear is a better term, she decided to become a law enforcement officer. Ezra mentions that he would give up everything just to be a police officer again. And she hands him the badge and says, well, just for tonight. Meanwhile, they are able to see what's happening inside the house through their binoculars. And he's getting a little worked up. And Dawn's like, don't say anything. I don't want to think about it. This is a really weird sex scene, by the way. Very strange power dynamic here between Reba and Dave. Oh, a very interesting thing that she says to him earlier on. Again, speaking about mirrors, we talk about, and by the way, just letting you know that next week's season finale is called Mirror, Mirror, because of course, mirrors and mirrors and mirrors upon mirrors in this series. Going all the way back to episode 1, where Dave runs towards the mirror when he almost is dying in that fire, confusing his own reflection for his potential salvation. But she says, Reba that is, says, when I look in the mirror, I see a selfish bitch. But when you look in the mirror, you see a hero. And that's the difference between the two of them. But I guess she's attracted to that selfish, or sees some parallel to herself. And this is some kind of form of torment, being in this relationship with Dave, punishing herself for being disloyal to her family, her current family. And of course, Michelle and Burke have paired up. They have nothing else to do because the car hasn't moved. Dave's not around. It's going to be hard to find anything to drink. We could get like some 40s at the convenience store. That's about all we can have to drink around here. How about we go back to my place? And Michelle's on board with this. And even though there's a little flirtation here, she does seem to want to turn the page and make sure this stays only friendly. And before things can get too serious, she decides to leave. Part of keeping Burke keeping her there this whole night has been telling her, you can be a detective. I was your age when I became detective. It's all going to work out for you. And when she decides it's time to go before things get too serious, he starts throwing in her face, all that stuff I said, forget it. You ruined my life. You caused me to cheat on my wife, and then you abandoned me. Even though earlier on he said, it wasn't your fault. He's kind of contradicting himself here. I cheated on my family long before with my job. I think a lot of people probably feel that way. And he gets really nasty and starts saying that she is transactional. And I'm sure this has been eating away at him ever since he heard it on that recording earlier in the day. And she's in an emotionally tough spot given the stresses. Her mom's coming out of jail, Dave confronting her about it earlier in the day. And this leads to a massive shock. She punches him in the throat. He grabs a pen and hands it to her like, do an emergency tracheotomy on me. Like, you have crushed my trachea. Obviously, not her intention. And she just stands there. And I guess this is a question I'll have for Darren when he joins the conversation. Was this intentional? Obviously not the initial punch, but then when suddenly she saw him dying, was this an opportunity that she was taking? There's enough ambiguity in the performance where Jurnee Smollett is really good in this scene, by the way, but terrified at what's happening. But is she choosing to let him die? Is she just frozen because she can't imagine that this is happening or that she can do this tracheotomy on him? I mean, honestly, if she ran out to the kitchen, got a knife, was able to, she could pull up a YouTube video? It may not have worked out, is my point. But is she choosing to let this happen, or is she just that child again, frozen as this terrible thing is happening and watching someone else die in front of her? But regardless what her thought process is, she immediately jumps to methodically cleaning up the house. And the whole idea of setting up Dave definitely is not on her mind when you think about that, because she's cleaning up all the evidence she was there. If she's planning immediately to burn everything down, also she's been in that house before, I assume, given their relationship before. So she probably didn't need to do all that. She's just reacting to doing the cleanup. And then suddenly the thought comes, what if I frame Dave for this fire? By the way, Dave already told her, I'm not using filters anymore. And no filter, no DNA. And she's using a filtered cigarette. Rip the filter off, lady, especially after you've put the thing in your mouth. Now, is it going to survive the fire? Probably not, but still, sloppy cover up here. And adding insult to injury, of course, she gets into the car. There had been a moment, which we flash back to here, where Dave throws his gloves into the side pocket of the passenger side door, where one of his gloves just happens to be. And she runs out to the back of the house, presumably, and drops the glove there to be found when the investigators show up. Meanwhile, the fire is starting to build inside the house. The fire spreads very quickly, by the way. Not sure if fire would actually burn this quickly. And hopefully, she better be hoping that nobody notices that fire and that nobody sees her speeding away, or that nobody has Ring cameras. I'm not sure if this is truly contemporary times. The actual story of this happened in the 90s. So, of course, there wouldn't be Ring cameras, but all these people have iPhones, so I assume this is present day or very close to present day. I hear that in the very well-known state of Orrington, United States. Wink, wink. There are a lot of Ring cameras in that particular population. Anyway, we will see if she can truly get away with this. And we'll all find out next week. Very curious to see what Darren thought of this. I thought this was a really thrilling episode, but what is going on with this story? This crazy reversal that this police officer is going to go down this way. It seems like the kind of plot contrivance that someone like a hack writer like Dave Goodson might have come up with. Anyway, we have one more week before we know. Okay, now Darren will join the conversation. I have these questions for him, and most importantly, we'll be breaking down the movie Weapons. All right, Darren, did you listen to...
No. Yep. How are you there, Victor? I definitely listened to your intro. It's always fun listening to you talk to yourself.
I do it a lot, as you can tell from that episode. Speaking of talking to myself, I actually wanted to ask you this question because I think it's when we maybe first started communicating, or one of the first conversations we had via email was about the Alien retrospective episode. Was that you that emailed me about it? I think you were one of the people who emailed me about it. And I was just curious because, of course, we're going to be talking about Alien Earth starting this week. But I was curious, of course, your relationship with the Alien franchise, but also that episode, for some reason, that's not the first time I've done like a retrospective on a series or somebody's career, but that episode has been really popular on the podcast for some reason. And I was curious, do you happen to know why that is? Not because I want you to pat me on the back, but because if I could figure out what makes some episodes connect and some not, probably would be good for me in general.
Well, I'm a big fan of the Alien franchise, and I'm a big fan of your retrospectives as well. And I think just because that Alien Romulus film was really interesting and really good, it was one of the better Aliens. So I think people were excited about it, and it was always fun revisiting memories of films that span decades, right?
Yeah.
So we've all got different memories of seeing the first Alien or Aliens. And I've got memories of seeing all of them. So it was really interesting to kind of unpack your own memories while listening to yourself go through the series. So yeah, I'm really excited for Alien Earth, and I hope it's a good one because I enjoyed Romulus a lot.
Same. I think I put it on there's actually a letterbox list where I rank them all, and I'm pretty sure I had it at number 3. I think that Alien and Aliens, the first two, are a cut above. But I would think that for me, the Alien Romulus, if people haven't caught up with it, was my third favorite. And obviously it's winking heavily at those first two movies. It's very much borrowing the style. It does practical effects and really trying to pay homage to those particular films. So it hits all those pleasure centers if you are, as opposed to, a lot of the Alien franchise has gone really weird, like really weird. And I kind of like it for its weirdness too, for taking some really strange chances. So I'm always on board with the Alien franchise in general, even for its failings. It makes it a more interesting overall text, I think. And in a way, this, from what I know, and the reviews have been very positive for this series, and some critics have seen the entire series and are literally saying, the first two episodes set you up for the kind of the action that you would expect from Aliens, like in the lineage of that film. And they basically say, you cannot imagine where this show is headed after those first two episodes, which are premiering this week. So very exciting. That just hearing that makes me very excited.
That's really good news. Yeah, one of the things I'm looking forward to is if they do practical effects, because they were always some of my favorite, in the early Alien films.
I think because of TV as well and because of budgetary constraints, there is definitely CGI, but a lot of it, from what I've heard of Noah Hawley in the few interviews. He's giving a lot of interviews, actually, the few that I've actually listened to, and I'll probably listen to more of his interviews before this week's episodes. But I think, what budgetarily they could handle, a lot of the sets are practical, a lot of the xenomorphs, and there's some new creatures that, are not officially the alien we're used to seeing, but some other kind of life forms that might be coming back on that ship as well, that a lot of that is practical. So I do like the idea of like blending practical with CGI, which I think is always the best approach in general.
That's so cool. Yeah, I don't know too much about this Noah Hawley character, but he seems like he's very switched on. He's done some good things, so I'm very much looking forward to this. And yeah, hopefully it's a cracker.
Yeah, can't wait to have. Did you see Legion, by the way? Have you ever seen Legion?
I saw a few episodes of Legion before I gave up on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I was a massive fan of the Fargo series, especially the
Mhm.
first couple. Yeah, I was a big fan.
Yeah. So I think, as I mentioned in that preface, that earlier introductory uh, section, it does, could be concerning given some of what he's done before, even some of the less successful Fargo seasons. But always interesting. So I'm always on board for seeing what he's going to try because I know he's going to try something interesting. And like I said, some critics have seen most of the season or the entire season, and they're saying this is a thrill, not only thrilling, but also it deals with some of the deeper philosophical versions of the mythology that we've seen, like in Prometheus, for example. So I don't think Prometheus was fully successful at wrestling with some of those things, or like, for example, Alien Covenant. And I said this in that previous episode on Alien also. I thought that all the Michael Fassbender stuff in Alien Covenant is fantastic, and the rest of the movie is kind of terrible, even though some of the effects are really impressive. But yeah, there's just logistically or plot wise so many just head scratching decisions that everybody makes. It's like being like a dumb slasher character, even though they're supposed to be like these elite scientists, but making the stupidest decisions imaginable. In Prometheus, also, by the way. But anyway, so that always bothered me. But even in Covenant, the Fassbender character. So I think Holly wants to, in a way, take all of that and the space he has in a season of the show. And I assume FX wants to go beyond this, another season, definitely. If this is successful, I'm pretty sure it's going to be successful. So anyway, all of that to say, very excited for this series.
Yeah, I love the androids. Even though the that AI Romulus android
Yes.
of of poor old mate from the first film, I was not on board for. I thought that was quite terrible. But I'm wondering if it kind of crosses over indirectly with the new Predator Badlands because that's got an android in it
Mm-hmm.
from Wayland Yutani. So yeah, I think it's interesting how the worlds always cross over.
It's weird how much of this might be crossing over because I know that Ridley Scott wants to have the Alien and Blade Runner, even though that's based on the Philip K. Dick novel, have those universes intersect as well. So maybe this is all building one giant mythology. And I guess, well, Blade Runner is with Warner Brothers. So I was going to say, if they're all under the same, owned by the same, studio, maybe they would extend this into this mega franchise. Who knows?
Yeah, that's crazy to think about. But if all these cool directors are behind it, then why not?
Yeah, I mean, if the talent is there, I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity. If they just make Alien versus Predator again, I'm good. Thank you very much. Okay, number two topic is this penultimate episode of Smoke. Uh, any general impressions you had of the episode, but of course, what did you think about this shocking finale of this episode?
Loved it. I love Smoke. It feels guilty to say. I think I say that every week. I love it. It's a great show. And this week we had more of Journey Smollett, who is so good. I mean, Dave Goodson is a great character, but she is the heart of this thing, and she really pushes it forward, especially at the shock ending, where she does her old mate in.
What did you think about her reaction there? I asked in my uh, opening commentary that she's obviously shocked by this turn of events. Do you think she's being opportunistic right away, or is she just in survival mode? Is she reconnecting with that terrified little girl she was when she was 12, which of course she reconnects with when Dave pours some salt in the wound and her mom's coming out of prison? What do you think is going through her mind? Because she is overwhelmed, to say the least, in that moment, right?
She is, and she does all of that. But also, do you remember the conversation between Ezra and the other police
Dawn?
lady in the car when she was talking about her when she became a police officer
Yeah.
because she acted
Right.
when there was a life-threatening emergency in front of her. Her natural reaction was to act,
Right.
whereas with Calderon, perhaps her natural reaction is to just freeze.
Freeze.
And it's really what she did. She couldn't work out. I mean, I thought it stretched credibility a bit where he's pushing a pen towards her. I mean, I don't know what I would do in that situation. I probably wouldn't just grab a pen and stab it into his neck.
Also that happens immediately. Like he immediately knows that his trachea is crushed, immediately goes for the pen. All of that was very funny, but it sets up the situation. I guess if he had just collapsed on the floor and died and she'd been like, what's wrong? Then it wouldn't be as inflammatory in a way, right? Because in this case, it's almost like he gave her the opportunity to rescue him and she freezes, right?
Yes. He's inviting her to act and she cannot act until after. So, yes, super interesting. And of course, she's going to frame Dave for the crime, which is great twist. But I just love the episode. I love things where she knows that he knows. So that they have to play out this farce or this play, trying to figure out when are they going to come clean to each other or who's going to break first. The tension in that was so cool, and can't wait for the finale.
Yeah, and by the way, I totally agree with that. More of that. I don't know why we don't see more of that. I love that open cat and mouse play where everybody knows more, like they're having a conversation in the open, and yet both of them know more and maybe don't know exactly what the other person knows, but they know that they're having layers to their conversation. I love that, so people should just do that in every movie, basically. Just put it in every movie, even romantic comedy. Put it in a romantic comedy. Yeah, it works in any situation.
And just the way that Dave Goodson was putting Rafe Spall in his place by exposing the affair with Calderon. He knows that everybody else is listening. I mean, it was just so fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. That part was fantastic. Oh, and of course the scene in the diner also where he's so good, where she's calling him pathetic to his face and he will not make eye contact with her. Is really fantastic choice. I don't know if the director requested it, but if Edgerton came up with that on his own, just great that he just will not look her in the face as she's saying these things to him. It's pretty amazing.
It's so cool. And you just don't want her to break, but he just takes her. He's the type of person that would just take you to your breaking point.
Yeah. He's a total asshole. Cannot wait to see him, get his comeuppance next week, which I assume is going to be the case. An episode called Mirror, Mirror, by the way. So I do wonder if the mirror will crack finally in this show and what might be behind that mirror or beyond it.
Yes, I can't wait to see what he really looks like.
Okay, now on to the main topic, I think. You saw Weapons. We've discussed this a little bit already. My sister saw Weapons also. We talked about it as I was driving up here, by the way. We talked about it for like an hour in the car. So I'm well prepared for this conversation.
Did you record that?
I wish I had, actually. We had some pretty interesting back and forth. But what did you think of this film? Maybe before we get to that, a little setting up this up. This is from Zach Crager, who was actually a comedian. He was in, what was the name of that comedy series? He was like on an MTV comedy series called like The Whitest Kids in the Room or something like that. I forget what it was called, but I remember when this show was on the air. This is like in the 90s when MTV was getting into the comedy arena. And if you look at his IMDb, he acted a little bit after that. He was very young. I think they were teenagers when they started doing that show on MTV. And he will act every once in a while, would write every once in a while on a TV show or on one of his friends' comedy films. But he probably was tenuously making things work in Hollywood for himself. One of these people that are kind of on the periphery of Hollywood. And then he makes Barbarian. He writes the script and he gets $4 million to make the movie. And somehow they let him direct it, which is interesting because I don't think he had much directing experience. And Barbarian became one of those really buzzy titles that didn't make a lot of money overseas because obviously it didn't have any kind of selling points. But in the US was very popular, made over $40 million on like a tiny budget. And then way more importantly, of course, it ended up on HBO Max. It ended up on digital rental, etc., and became way bigger once it hit home markets. So what was your experience of seeing Barbarian?
Yeah, I don't remember it in the cinema, but I remember as soon as it hit digital, I was all over it. And I thought the first two-thirds of the movie were very, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. I thought the setup was great. It's a setup that we all have thought about when you walk into an Airbnb and someone's already there. I don't know. Every time I
Right.
hire an Airbnb, I always expect it to go terribly. Um, and I thought the way that it flashed back in the second act
Yeah.
was really brave. And I think it worked for me because I was like, oh, it's the same house. And just the way that it was set out. It's been a while since I've seen it. I only saw it once because I was
Yeah.
so let down by the last act. I wasn't into it at all. And I
Oh,
thought it
really
was
interesting.
kind of ridiculous what happened in it. I was off it. Um, so that's my experience with Barbarian, but it was showed enough promise that I was really interested in who this guy was and what he was going to do next.
And I think that's very much what the audience reaction was as well. It was very divisive, especially like you said, without spoiling anything here for people who haven't seen it. It's very easy to watch. I think it's still on Max. I think it's on Netflix as well right now. So very easy to find. And it has some of the DNA, and you can see that this is how he works. It's funny, and we'll get into this, but he claims that he doesn't really have any thematic interest in what's happening in this film. And I think that might be detrimental, to be honest. And he says that when he writes, he's just character first, plot first, and he's just letting the story tell him like where it wants to go, which is honestly the best way to write, I think. And that he reads it as he's writing it as an audience member, and he works on it until he gets to the point where he's like, yeah, that's where it's supposed to go, basically, like when he just thinks it feels right. So it's very intuitive for him. And I think the themes that emerge from these works as well are probably intuitive. But, just prefacing what I'm going to say about the movie in general, I very much liked this film, by the way, the new one. But at the same time, I think that it's very thematically sloppy, if even probably thematically completely incoherent, if you start to pick at it at all. But I thought it was in the theater a refinement of what he did in Barbarian, where just when you think you know where the story is going to go, it changes again. And just like the idea in your mind of like what is going to happen next, and this and then of course a very surprising and funny finale as well. But before we get into any kind of spoilers, what was your general feeling for the film?
I really, really enjoyed watching this film. I have some reservations about the comedy in it.
Yeah.
Especially towards the end. But that doesn't ruin the film for me, and I really want to watch it again because I think it felt so confident in its storytelling. And it's one of my favorite genres of film, this mystery thriller with horror elements, potentially supernatural elements that don't overdo the whole theme of the film. And the characters were fantastic. I loved the acting. I loved the way, it's so hard to talk about this film without giving away some things, but the way that the chapters were organized with different characters, so you're focusing on a different character every 15, 20 minutes or so. I thought it worked really well. I thought I was a little bit afraid that there was going to be too many characters that I wasn't going to be able to get a handle on it. I was going to get a bit lost, but he does it so well that all the characters are in each other's stories, and it just pushes the story forward really fantastically. Now, the trailer for this film is brilliant.
Yes.
And that really made me want to watch the film.
I was just going to say, interject there about the trailer for sure, that I normally avoid trailers, but because I was seeing so many movies this summer, inevitably I could not avoid it. And I felt like, oh, the trailer's giving away too much. And then, of course, I went to see the movie, and I'm like, the trailer is like the first few minutes of the movie. It's like he's given away very, very little, and it's an incredible, smart way to write a script and sell a movie, where you basically are saying you can advertise this movie with the first 5 minutes of the film practically as a trailer, and you're not giving away the film, which is like, usually the films are completely given away by the trailer. So anyway, just that in and of itself was very clever.
excellent, so clever, because it just sets up the mystery, and you're like, oh, that
Yep.
film sounds very interesting. I'm going to have a check it out, and they just lay it out at the start of the
Right.
film. That's the
Yep.
mystery, and that's what you're going to watch for the next 2 hours. Yeah, awesome. Really enjoyed the film, but yeah, a couple of reservations, but it doesn't ruin it for me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we're not in spoilers yet, but I've warned everybody who's listening to this, definitely see this movie before we get into spoilers. I don't think it's a spoiler, by the way. You touched on a couple of things here, that the structure of the film is like you mentioned. Once again, just some kind of background on the film. When the Barbarian film was in theaters, there apparently he wrote the script when the movie Barbarian was just in theaters, and there was a bidding war over this script, which I got to say, that was very surprising to me, because I feel like it's a particular knack to be a good script reader, and I don't think I have that knack, because I've read certain screenplays, because I've tried to write my own screenplays, and I try to read read ones that I think make good films. And I don't see on the page oftentimes the thing that makes the film really good. And I do wonder, if I'd read the script, if I'd be like, we got to pour money into this. Like, I don't know if I would have seen it, is basically my point. But apparently it had this bidding war and ended up at Warner Brothers, New Line through Warner Brothers. And they spent $40 million on this movie, which, once again, I don't understand how they spend so much money on these movies. I just saw Eddington, which I know hasn't gotten to Australia yet. But if you do go see that costs $25 million, and it feels like a much bigger movie, and also very interesting. Like, thematically, there's a lot of interesting overlap here, which I won't get into right now until you see that movie. But it feels like, a similarly scoped film with bigger stars, and it didn't cost as much. So I'm like, where do they spend this money? I really don't understand where this money goes. But regardless, he got this money for the film, and of course, it paid off in spades, because the film had a huge opening weekend here in the U.S. and overseas as well. This is going to be maybe 200 million in the U.S. and at least $100 million overseas for original IP. This is not like a Conjuring movie or something that's based on a Stephen King adaptation or something. So it's just shocking that the audience came out. Not only is the word of mouth very strong on the film, the audience came out on week one. So they knew what they were doing when they bought the script. But a couple of points about it. When he was writing the script, in his own mind, he said this was a combination of Magnolia, and there we have the overlapping chapters from different character POVs that advance the story, and Hereditary. So how do you think that maps onto what you saw in the film?
Yeah, Magnolia makes sense. It made me think of a movie called Go, which had I think
Yes.
3 parts with
Love
following different actors. Yeah, I've heard it compared to Pulp Fiction, but I think it's more Go and Magnolia.
Yeah.
Hereditary as well, that fits for sure.
We'd have to get into spoilers and where that kind of fits. Yeah, so we'll avoid that for now.
But the actors must have cost money, right? I mean, Julia Garner, Josh Brolin, Alden Ehrenreich. I don't know if he's commands a big fee, but I would have thought that they've got meaty roles.
I agree with that, but like I said, I'm comparing this to Eddington, and I mean, you got the Joker is in there, Pedro Pascal is in there, So I mean, like that's a bigger higher brand cast for Joaquin Phoenix, of course, was who I was referencing there, but that seems like a bigger cast payday for sure. But anyway, it's I mean, I'm sure everybody got paid very well. So congratulations, because it all paid off. And I'm sure everybody, oh, by the way, so Zach Crager, his next project is a Resident Evil adaptation. What do you think about that?
Strange choice.
Very strange, yeah.
I guess maybe there's a lot of pressure to do something original again, which is as successful as the last 2 that he's done. So maybe it's like a free swing with a big budget and with a property that you can do whatever you like with. And if it fails, then it's maybe not his fault.
And but he apparently said that this is going to be an original take on Resident Evil. He loves the original games. He says he's never seen any of the movies. I don't know if that's true or not, but he said he's never seen any of the films. And I'm a fan of the first Resident Evil film. It's corny garbage, but fun for me. So by the other PT Anderson, the other Paul Anderson, the Paul W.S. Anderson. But so I do like that one, but I do think he's going with something different that's maybe more in that has the same hits the same thematic things that he's interested in as we see in these two films. All right.
Yeah, I'm not all across the Resident Evil. I think I walked into one by accident.
See the
Yeah,
first one. The first one's a lot of fun and the
the first one,
garbage
okay.
movie, but fun, but fun.
Yeah, I do. I think I remember the third or fourth one, and I was like, "What am I doing here?"
Okay, I had. Oh yeah, my God! By the time we get to that, even the second one is pretty much garbage at that point. Okay, what do you think about this? Because of the writer's strike, they needed to recast almost the entire film. So, what do you think about this original casting for this film? So, Josh Brolin's character originally Pedro Pascal. He's in everything, my friend. He's in everything. He was going to even be in this movie. I'm sure he wouldn't have done Eddington. I assume they conflicted. So, Pedro Pascal instead of Brolin. How do you feel about that?
Great, straight swap. That'd be fantastic. Yep, I think they're both
I
fantastic
love
actors.
Brolin. I mean, I like Pascal a lot. Just the way he has that emotion on, so close to the surface with him. But I loved Josh Brolin in this role.
I actually didn't know he was in this film. And in one of the first scenes, he's talking in a parent teacher meeting,
Yeah.
and I recognized his voice, but they didn't show his face, and I thought that was really cool the way that it introduced a character and an actor that you know, but you don't actually see him until it's his chapter of the story.
Okay, next swap out. Instead of Julia Garner, we have Renata Rensvi. I'm mispronouncing the name terribly. This is a very famous Danish actress. She was the star of The Worst Person in the World. If you've never seen that, by the way, an incredible, one of my favorite films of the last few years. And of course, she was also in Presumed Innocent. Not great in Presumed Innocent, I would say. But, I still think that she's a great actress given what I've seen of her Danish films. So what do you think about her rather than Julia Garner?
Look, Julia Garner is so good in Weapons.
So good.
But I do like The Worst Person in the World. That was a trip of a movie. Yeah.
Love that movie.
So sure, why not?
Yeah, I think she would have worked very well, I think, in this role. Although I absolutely love Julia Garner. I could have honestly, I could be critical of the film. It should have just been her POV throughout. And the other characters could have shown up.
Sorry to interrupt, but Julie Garner, the way that you have a view of who she is when she's in public as a teacher, and then you see her in private, where she's completely different, a little bit loose. She plays that role so well.
All right, the principal. Instead of Benedict Wong, we would have Brian Tyree Henry. What do you think?
Yeah, I can't really see that, to be honest. He doesn't seem old enough.
I think I would have liked that. I mean, principal doesn't have to be that much older than the rest of the cast, but I take your point. Okay, and how about this one? I absolutely loved, by the way, Alden Ehrenreich in this role. Thought he was fantastic. But his original casting was Tom Burke from, Furiosa and Black Bag earlier this year. And of course, a bunch of other things as well, the British actor. But I do love Tom Burke. So what do you think about that swap?
I've seen those films, but I can't really picture him. So maybe not. But Alden Ehrenreich, I think I just saw him in that Ironheart TV series where he was really cool in that as well. So, after that Solo debacle, he's doing some really cool roles, and he was great in this. Quite a tragic character.
Oppenheimer, great in Oppenheimer.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
The by the way, the mustache is pretty funny. Speaking of Magnolia, he had the mustache because he was channeling, and this is a one-to-one map, by the way, the John C. Reilly character from Magnolia. And Zach Crager was like, you can't have the mustache. It's too on the nose. And then he did like a Zoom reading of the script with the mustache. And Crager was like, God damn it, he has to have the mustache. So anyway, the mustache apparently was Ehrenreich's own addition.
I'm going to have to see Magnolia again, because that's an old movie. I haven't seen that for a long time. And it's quite a heavy movie. You don't really want to see that too many times in your life. But I can see the resemblance, yeah.
I think structurally there is a lot of it, obviously. All right. How did you... I got to say that I was absolutely thrilled in the opening moments of the film. Just the confidence of it, that floating camera, the fairy tale setting. I just felt like this guy knows. We could talk about whether he completely lands the plane, but the that opening sequence, I'm like, oh man, this guy knows what he's doing. I was like totally glued to my seat. And then when the George Harrison needle drop drops, I was like, holy cow, this is like, we're in for a ride. This is good stuff. And the audience was like riveted. There was a group of people that the theater was completely packed, by the way. And there was a group of people just chattering away. And by the end of that sequence, everybody was just glued to the screen. It was, once again, very important. You see movies that kind of don't really hit their tone early on. And you hear the audience, like they're so used to blabbing in front of the TV in their homes that audience members can be like really bad to see in a movie theater, especially when it's crowded. So you have to like grab these people by the collar sometime. And this film did it excellently, I think, at the start.
It's very important to grab those type of people because if you don't, they're going to talk throughout the whole film.
Exactly. I love this George Harrison song, by the way, which is from that big album, of course, the All Good Things Must Pass, or whatever it's called. The one that, of course, has the My Sweet Lord song on it, his most iconic song. But this is one of the deeper cuts off of there. But the lyrics to this are so important to the themes of the film itself. I actually pulled up the lyrics for this conversation, but it says, "Watch out now, take care, beware of," and they had warned you of these different things, one verse at a time. And it says, "Beware of thoughts that linger, winding up inside your head, the hopelessness around you in the dead of the night. Beware of sadness," because thematically there is, of course, this fact that this terrible thing has happened and it's festering in people's minds, obviously. But then later on in the last chapter, it says, "Beware of greedy leaders. They take you where you should not go." So it's like, again, something, we won't spoil anything yet, but something that thematically ties into the film as well. So, I thought this was so confident. Even the musical choices were just really incredible filmmaking. One of the best opening scenes I've seen all year.
That's so cool. You wonder whether they have, when they're writing the film, they have these songs playing, or whether it's just like a music supervisor who just tacks it on at the end.
Well, you know what? He talked about this, and I think this is really fascinating, how this is really coming from his mind. And I think we'll get to some of the detrimental aspects of maybe having too much in your own purview and not having. I actually think this is kind of what might be happening to Jordan Peele as well. I think he needs another set of eyes to give another polish to his work. And these two guys are friends, by the way. So I think that, there's pluses and minuses to having something so uniquely from one POV. But he was talking about writing this, and as he was writing the script, he was just listening to music that had this theme of darkness. And when he heard the George Harrison song, he wrote the scene. So that was the song that like triggered this opening sequence. So it's pretty amazing when you think about that.
Well, that's art, isn't it? That's so creative. I love hearing that stuff.
Yeah, I do too. I love that. I'm such a, I will say some critical things about this film, which I very much enjoyed, by the way. But I'm like really rooting for this guy, really rooting for this guy. So we get to the very beginning of the film. We're going to get to minor spoilers now. I think that at this point, actually, before we start breaking down anything in the film, did you want to anything else before we get into actual spoilers?
No. We need to get into spoilers. I
Yeah.
find it very difficult to talk about this movie without spoiling it.
All right. At this point, full spoilers. I'm actually going to walk through the plot a little bit, not beat for beat, but just kind of each one of these chunks from these different POVs, character POVs. So the deep spoilers probably won't come till later on. But if you're listening to this, you have not seen this movie, you really should turn off this and come back to it later, because at this point, Darren, I think that we will probably have free reign to spoil things as we go through the plot. So,
and I've got plenty of episodes of your podcast just sitting in my player where I've just stopped it, and then I'm going to come back to it. But I will come back to it eventually,
as long as you promise to come back. I'm just kidding. All right. So the first POV character we have is Justine. After this incredible opening sequence, we have like this town hall. This is Julia Garner, incredible in this performance. Everybody, the teachers are so angry. And this is really where I thought the film was probably going to go as this metaphor for, kids disappear, like whether and we'll get into this, of course, there's like whether you think it's a school shooting, right? Like a classroom of kids get killed. Why this classroom? Why did this happen to me? You think about those parents who some of them are like, well, thank God it wasn't my kid. And then there's these other people going like, but why was it my kid? Right. And this is a very deep and painful topic. And you think about how she reacts to this. She goes, I just want to talk to Alex, the boy who survived, in this case, the one who's still around. And they're like, why do you care? Leave him alone. People are already giving you too much scrutiny. And she just timidly says, we're the only ones left. And it's so heartbreaking. And once again, Julia Garner, incredible in this opening scene. It's like really amazing sequence.
She's
and
an
she's
amazing
not a perfect
actress.
person. She really is, yeah.
She's great in everything. And I think it's interesting because she knows in her heart that she had nothing to do with this. So the only other person that is involved is this kid. And she just really wants to talk to him.
Yeah, and people are harassing her. She's getting threatening phone calls. She is not nobody in this film. We, very like Magnolia, when we get to see these people at home, they all have serious character flaws. She's an alcoholic. She's cheating with her ex. She knows he's in a new relationship, and she's a mess, right, at home. Just she's a mess, right? But she doesn't mean she's not a caring teacher as well, and that she's not significantly or terribly concerned for Alex and, of course, for these kids in general.
Absolutely. And I do like when the principal is talking to her and he says that she tends to overreach in some things. So yeah, she's not a perfect person and she's not a perfect teacher, but she's doing her best.
And one thing I want to say before I nitpick a lot of the plot and maybe some of the themes in this as well, I think that especially this between Barbarian, which had great interactions between like that kind of almost blind date type situation. Can they trust each other or not? I love that opening sequence of Barbarian. So that's all really well done. He's obviously very good at writing those type of dialogue scenes. But I love all the little character details that he writes, not only like the quirkiness of her and just things we see that pay off later on. Like, for example, we see her going to the, buy vodka like a third time at this point in this opening sequence. And in the corner of the screen, someone is chasing her down and like even pours vodka on her. It turns out it's her ex-boyfriend's wife that she is, basically found out about this hookup that happened the night before. But then, of course, that is someone else is going to be weaponized, targeting her as well. So it's almost like foreshadowing something that's going to happen later. So all of this is really clever in the way it's all designed. But also there's all the little character beats in when she shows up at the liquor store the first time. James, the drug addict, is the person who opens the door for her. And even there, it's like he says, oh, can I have some change? I have to get some money for a bus ticket. And then 2 minutes later, she walks out the door and he says exactly the same thing. And it really tells you something about him, like how he is the type of person who's not even, not even aware that he just talked to this woman 2 minutes before, because that's where his head's at. And all those, like every interaction, even the minor ones, are all about building character, and they're all really, memorable and well defined scenes. Like they're all individually excellent scenes. It's like really impressively done. Now, how it all fits together, we'll get to that.
It's so clever how that guy, he just pops into her story.
Yep.
And it's almost like an aside. You almost don't realize that he's going to be a character later on.
Right.
So cool. But the way that she was shot going into the liquor store first, the camera is behind her. She's in the center of frame. And the way it follows her through the aisles is so cool. And then later on, the camera is in front of her. And that's when you see the attacker come from behind. I mean, just the symmetry of it is so beautiful.
All of it is so well thought out from a visual perspective. It's like really exceptional filmmaking. Oh, of course, in like day 2 or whatever. Oh, but actually, she goes to the police station because someone writes witch on her car. We find out who that is. And there's another foreshadowing, by the way, in the film. There is literally a witch in this film. And, she runs into Alden Ehrenreich, her ex, and they end up meeting. Another great song, by the way, Dark End of the Street. which is about two people having an affair. But if you look at the lyrics, it's also like, I'll meet you at the dark end of the street. It's also like in your mind, you're thinking these are the kids disappearing into the night. But the song actually is about two people having an affair behind their spouses' backs, which is what's literally happening in the scene. But once again, very smart, even the way they use the music here. Yeah, they hook up that night. Oh, and of course, she eventually gets wasted. All these, she keeps trying to meet up with Alex, ends up in front of his house. She gets wasted in front of his house. And how did your audience react to the sequence where the door opens up? She's passed out in the car, and this like zombie-like mother character comes popping out the door.
There is a couple of jump scares which were very effective in this film, weren't they? Um, but it's not a jump scary film. There are a couple of jump scares, but I don't know if they're telegraphed. They didn't really make me jump out of my seat, but they just added to the sense of dread and just the sense of where is this mystery going. I love how she tries to get the witch Graffiti off her car. Doesn't have any success whatsoever. So she's just like, oh, stuff it, I'll just drive it around. Like, I don't know if I would be driving around a car. I'd hire a car or something, but it's just in her character. She's like, well, too bad. I'm not a witch, and this is my car, so I'm just going to drive it around.
It allows the Archer character, the Josh Brolin character, to spot her very easily later in the movie, by the way.
Imagine every single person in this town is going to know exactly where she is at all times.
I also thought about the nonce on the adolescence miniseries where I was like, she needs to maybe just paid over the car at this point.
Yes, exactly. That I definitely thought of that.
Oh, another weird thing that happens here is this clown figure appears to her in a very scary nightmare. The nightmare sequences are all very good in this film, and so it's almost like there's a clairvoyant aspect to what's happening with these folks because they're having these visions, right, of something that is literally a threat amongst them. Oh, and the one last thing I wanted to mention about her segment was going back to that moment where the person gets into the car. He, again, is so good at manipulating the audience because the mother character walks past the window. And there's a moment where everybody in the audience kind of like let out a sigh of relief. And then where people in the audience jumped was hearing the rear car door open. So it's like he's playing the audience like a fiddle at that point.
Okay, so now I understand which part you were talking about. Sorry, I didn't really quite get it before, but that reveal of that person coming past her window, that's kind of the first instance in this film where you think, okay, something's up. There's something supernatural really is occurring. So you need to get your head around that because in the future of this movie, there's going to be some things where you're going to have to think that, there's something going on.
And at that point, we jump into Archer's story. This is the Josh Brolin character. Beautiful the way this starts, where he's sleeping in his son's bed. He's obviously haunted by this. And I really liked, once again, I like an investigation. These are some screenwriting hacks, by the way. I don't understand why they're not more common. That having a mystery that's trying to be solved. They did this with The Ring. They did this with the movie Smile as well. Having a mystery that has to be solved pulls the audience in. And then, of course, nailing the landing will get you an A cinema score. That's basically what it comes down to. So do those two things, people, and you're probably going to have a hit movie. But we find out that he's the one who wrote The Witch on the car. He has an incredible dream sequence. You mentioned this to me when we were chatting offline about this, but he sees a gun over the house. What did you think about that sequence, that dream sequence where he's, runs into his son, who can't communicate with him, of course, again, foreshadowing what's actually happening. So there's some level of clairvoyance in their visions, these dreams they're having. And he also sees a clown figure in this nightmare. But what did you think about that gun floating over the house?
That's so epic. And you mentioned The Ring. It's this movie does echo The Ring as well, in the way that it's structured. That's a good pickup. The gun was terrifying. It was terrifying, and that's what I thought this is what this film is about a school shooting. Right. I kind of had hints of it before, maybe watching the trailer, but the way that it was there, maybe that's what he is thinking. Now, I don't think it continues with that metaphor for much longer. That's it. And that's what he's thinking. And that's just this collective consciousness. I mean, we feel it from over here, even though we don't have these school shootings, but
Right.
we feel it every time it happens, a major one happens over there. We do feel it and we just shake our heads in disbelief that this can happen.
Right.
And it was terrifying to see that just hovering over the house, and it's got a little alarm clock there which shows that 2:17 time where his kid is gone. He's a tragic, haunted character, and you can just put yourself in those shoes. Imagine losing your kid for no reason. I mean, it's just shocking.
When he's laying there in bed with him, when he like basically he's very cool, like for almost something out of a David, out of Twin Peaks or something, where he follows his son in this dream, comes across to a house that isn't the house they eventually find, but like a mirror image of his house, walks inside, goes up to the same room, sees his son there, and then he lays in bed with him and he's like telling him, talk to me, and he's apologizing to him. It was devastating, like devastating.
So devastating. And the fact that his wife just kind of glides past the door, you can just see that their relationship is completely broken because they've lost their son. And I don't think she appears in the movie anymore, but
Again,
just that little moment, you can feel just the fracture that it's just that it's caused, just this epic loss.
Speaking of, he and very cleverly, he like actually looks at these ring cams and he starts to triangulate the position of these kids from, he probably could have been even more accurate if he had found another ring cam, because there apparently is in the opening sequence more than two, but he gets close enough to identify what he's looking for by the end of the film. But I do love, once again, the little details here. I like when he goes to the wife of this other kid who he knows has the ring camera. He's going house to house until he sees someone else with a ring camera. And he says, "Can I see that?" And she's like, "I'm not comfortable with that." And he's like, "I understand." He gets in the car and then he waits for the husband to come in. And I'm like, exactly. Like that tells you a lot. Again, these like subtle things that tell you a lot about the characters in this film. And I thought that was really excellent character work. Justin Long, by the way, from Barbarian, turning up and finally aging. This guy's been ageless for decades. He finally starting to look his age, or at least close to his age. But
it's so good. The wife was like, "No, you're not going to look at the ring cam," and he was kind of just taken by surprise. He's like, "Oh, well, yeah, I guess so." And then when they're looking at it, he's like, "This is very disturbing to look at this."
Yeah, I like that way. He's like, it's like he hasn't watched it. He goes, "This is very strange to be watching this right now." And the kids are running this Naruto Run, which is pretty funny as well. Eventually, in this sequence, he runs into Justine, with the painting, and then we have that thing where she is looking off screen as he's yelling in her face. And it turns out that it is Marcus, the principal, is like weaponized, running in that Naruto position, that stance, running right at her. And of course, now at this moment, is when Archer starts to realize there's something really messed up going on.
Okay, this was an epic moment in the film. So, what's this Naruto position? I'm not familiar with that. Is that like an anime thing?
In anime, yeah, there's this character called Naruto, and he runs exactly like this. He like has his body bent forward, and he has his arms in that like lower V position, and that's exactly how he runs. So I don't know why these kids are running that way, but it obviously is just something that whatever Crager just stuck in his head. He just said that it's an easy way to identify this is not a natural way to run, I guess, so that when you see this. It pays off. Like I think when the kids are running in that position, it's a little too on the nose to be odd for odd's sake. But I think it's very effective when suddenly you see the principal running that way, because you're like, oh my God, something really messed up is happening in this town.
Yeah, and visually it just seems like it's like a fighter jet or like a kamikaze jet that's coming. And this moment in the film was one of the most terrifying moments for me. I love horror films, even though this is maybe not a purely horror film, which are shot in the daylight, because there's things, if they're scary in the daylight, that means they're extremely frightening, because everything's scary at night, right? Any shadow is scary, but to see this guy with his eyes bulging out, clearly on something, coming to attack her with no reason, I was like, all right, I'm in. This film has got me. Bring it on. I want to know what this is about. I want to solve this mystery. So cool.
And I agree with you. And then we get much less interesting POVs. The first one is Paul. This is the Alden Ehrenreich character, who, hooks up with her. And, we've already seen him here. There's some real comedy here in the fact that he keeps getting like needle pricks in the finger, even though this is like a phobia of his. And he gets stabbed in the face at one point, which is really shocking, but very funny. A lot of face trauma in this movie, by the way. But this was not as interesting to me. And I think this is where maybe the film doesn't coalesce as much, because thematically, it doesn't add to this kind of longing for answers to what happened to these children from the teacher, from the parent. If he was like driven, like, I have to solve this mystery, then it would maybe add a little bit something. But he just kind of just wants to get by without like sliding back into alcoholism. It seems to be all he's trying to do. Doesn't seem to be very ambitious in any way. And he ends up getting drawn into the story. So this didn't work as much. I love the performance, by the way. I think it's fantastic. I loved all the interactions. I think the comedy's very funny when he freaks out at the end, thinking that the guy's coming back to, chew or rat him out for the sucker punch. Like, the comedy of this is all very effective, but this is where this segment didn't work as well as the first two.
That makes sense when you say that it's not pushing the story forward, but it was very comedic. And I did love his performance. And just the fact that it's a cop, he's a cop, and you're seeing people on their worst days, but then you're having a bad day on top of that. I mean, it's just terrible. How do you get through your day when you're getting stabbed by
Right.
potentially dirty needles from a guy that's essentially looks completely unthreatening?
And next we have that sequence with the drug addict. James is the character's name. And, he's another great character, another great performance, great comedy. Once again, I love when he sees the $50,000 reward and he realizes that house he stumbled into is, he can get him a big prize. All of this is very entertaining. But again, I feel like it doesn't, he doesn't really pay off the themes of the film beyond, like, obviously he breaks into the house and discovers that the kids are in Alex's house. This is the one kid who came to school after the disappearances. But so it's necessary because he's breaking into homes. But other than plot necessity, he doesn't really add, or he doesn't enrich the themes of the film either, I think. So this was, for me, it was deflating the film a little bit at this point. Although the comedy here, terrific. And him walking into that house and finding what he finds is truly shocking stuff.
Yeah, so amazing. I did love him. I feel like he's like a homage to Jay and Silent Bob, who's a very lovable
Yes.
character, if not extremely flawed. And yeah, the way that he actually discovers the kids. I mean, he actually solves the mystery almost.
Right.
Shocking, completely shocking. And then yeah, but I can understand what you're saying is that it doesn't forward the story a bit more, but it gives this element, this comedic element that comes to the fore. So it almost changes from dramatic, the first couple of stories, to these couple of stories more comedic, which I'm not sure how on board I was with it.
And then, of course, we get the Marcus's story. This is the principal. He has terrible eating habits with his boyfriend. And this is when, the other shoe drops. And once again, all the character details, phenomenal. This character, I did not even know Amy Madigan was in this film at all. She was not obviously highlighted in any way. And she walks into his office, and this clown character that we've seen 3 times now, basically every character except for Paul, the police officer, has seen this clown figure at some point in their storyline. And then, of course, she shows up. She's Alex's aunt. She literally is. It's not just a story. It looks absolutely insane the way she's dolled herself up for this trip to the police, to the principal's office. And of course, the principal is like, I really need to talk to the parents. I love all the details of these interactions, but I especially like when the secretary brings her in and she just stands in the doorway.
Good.
She just stands in the doorway like, look at this. And she's trying to get a reaction from the principal. The principal will not give her what she wants, but she's just standing there waiting. It's fantastic. And yeah, this and it turns out all of this is driven by this woman, this literal witch who has come into their town. And what did you think about this reveal? It's very tragic, by the way, that she gets Marcus to kill his own husband, and then of course sicks him on to Justine. the character later on. Of course, that's where he intersects with her story again. Ends up getting his head squished and really gross. Also ends up smashing his own face into his husband's face, distorting his face and also destroying his husband completely. So all of this is crazy and takes that comedy, that whole sequence where she like wants to drink a bowl of water, and all of that is very comedic. But then, of course, it really disturbing as well. And what did you think about this sequence?
So it's very clever, isn't it? Because it's actually showing you what's happened in this film, who's responsible for
Right.
it, and you're going to have to stretch your credibility to think, okay, it's a witch. This is what this film's about. It's a witch. She's the villain. She's doing it all. And they actually show you how she does it by
Right.
wrapping the hair and all the ritual, which is very important later in the film.
Right.
I really enjoyed that stuff. I love that stuff, and showing how she actually weaponizes Wong to kill or to attack the teacher, right? Yeah, great horror scene. And I don't know who she's from, that actress, but yeah, she's definitely a big bad character.
Yeah, she gives a really interesting performance. Most of it is in the last POV character, the boy Alex, who you see how she's manipulated him. She is his aunt. Has come to this house, is basically sucking the life out of us, presumably other members of the family too. Now worked her way to the younger daughter, and now that's not enough. This cancer that's eating her. She is dying indeed of cancer, and she's trying to. She's a parasite, right? And we, hitting that on the nose. Of course, we have the whole Benjamin Marcus and his husband are watching a documentary about cordyceps and how they live inside of these ants and then emerge. And then you have later on, when we cut to Alex's POV, they're learning about different types of parasites in school. So of course, like hitting you right in the face with like the theme that she's some kind of parasite. But I have to say that that I found a little weak. And I was talking to my sister about this earlier. I would have preferred like to make this thing more thematically coherent if we maybe had her POV and we see how she over time was willing to literally, destroy the people around her, this entire community, just for a little more life. And that she's a parasite, right? And that understanding her psychology a little bit more, and how she maybe is manipulating the people in town using their fear, their sadness about the situation, and weaponizing these people against each other and kind of hiding in plain sight while she does that. I think I needed that a little bit more to make this feel like a whole, continuous thought.
Oh, come on, that's so cool. That would have been really cool to see her as a character in the story and to see things from her POV and to see that maybe she's conflicted. She's not just an evil character. She's actually conflicted by taking these children and sucking the life out of them, which, I didn't think that was completely obvious to me, but thinking about it later, you're like, oh, okay, that's why the kids are in the basement just kind of standing there. She's using their power somehow. But yeah, that's very cool. Why didn't they write a POV section for her like that?
Exactly.
And they could have still had the ending the way that it ended.
Everything could have been the same. Everything could have been the same. Yeah, exactly.
It could have possibly hit harder. I'm giving up the way that I felt about the ending, but that could have actually given a little bit more feeling to it, and a little bit more heart. Yeah.
And I think they give her some humanity. I love the scene. And part of the reason I even thought I would have liked to see her POV is I think she could be an interesting character, not just this, one-dimensional parasite, because there's that moment where she's afraid of dying and he comes in. It's a beautiful, great performance by this kid, by the way. And he comes in and says to her that are you sick? Can I help you? Do you want to go to the hospital? And he's so caring to her. And she's very warm to him, being like, oh, I thought coming here would make me feel better, but it didn't work. And that's when she hatches this plan to abduct the kids as well. So obviously monstrous behavior on her part, but she has some humanity there. And I would have thought
if they made her a three-dimensional character, it would have made her a better villain, not a weaker villain. I think she made her a better villain. And I needed that, I think, to make this thing feel like to cohere more. Because I think thematically, there is this definitely a metaphor for school shooting, a metaphor for the, like the way a society, a cult, like a town absorbs that tragedy and turns on itself, and the toxicity of scapegoating people, all of that is there, and then it kind of veers away from that. And then when the witch showed up, I was like, a witch, really? I'm like, okay, I guess I'm on board with this, but it was not as strong as I thought as where it started.
Very interesting. Yeah, I of course there was a witch. I mean, it was painted on her car the whole time. Of
Right.
course there was a witch in the story. Yeah, and of course it had to do with the kid, because the kid was the only kid that survived. Of course, he's wrapped up in the mystery somehow, and I did like how he did almost care for her because she's family, even though she makes his parents stab themselves in the face.
And he has nobody else, right? He's a kid. He has nobody else, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's his home. She's in his home, and now she's caring for him, even though he has to feed the soup to his parents and everybody else, which doesn't look like a fun job to do after school every day.
Definitely not. So many mouths to feed, so many. What a great scene, by the way, and what a great performance when the kids start coming around the corner and he realizes the full weight of what's happening, and his reaction is like just stunned. Oh my God, all these kids are going to be here now too.
Epic. So epic. Oh my God.
And then we can just cut to the end. And of course, by the end, we have the triangulation that Archer's done. He rescued, I keep forgetting him, Justine. He rescues Justine. The police officer and this drug addict have been lured into the house. They're there now. They lure her in with Archer in tow as well. So they're all in the house at the same time. There's these salt lines, which is another kind of Wiccan mythology as well, that like if you cross that line, they attack. They are, mindlessly attacking. Justine has to end up killing this guy. She kills the other guy, kid as well. And eventually she's in the basement. Very scary scene, by the way. She just happens to be down there when he discovers his son, and she takes the necklace from his neck. This is Archer's chain, and weaponizes him against her as well. But of course, very cleverly, perfect ending to this movie, that Alex knows how this magic works. He's been paying attention, and he turns those kids into weapons and turns them on this witch. And they literally, this is like Raising Arizona, running, smashing from house to house, like the sequence with, what's his name? Nicolas Cage. And the diapers, from house to house, being chased by dogs, by police, by everybody else. But in this case, being chased by these kids. And they literally rip her apart. How did you
remind me of the chase scene from Point Break?
Yes, another good call out. Yep.
Very visceral chase sequence. Incredible. The audience was in raptures. I mean, I was laughing my ass off. It was so comedic.
Yes.
And this is one of the reservations I have with this film, because I wanted to feel something. Well, I did feel comedy, laughter, because it was
right.
Just the way that this swarm of kids were jumping through closed windows, smashing through closed windows into the street to attack this lady who's doing it. She knows that her weapons are coming against her. So incredible ending. The way the kid figures out how to do it, smart kid. But she shows him multiple times during the film. She shows him exactly the ritual that needs to happen to weaponize these people. Hilarious scene. Everyone was laughing. I don't know about your audience.
Same thing. The audience was, there was probably half the audience was kind of just stunned and didn't know if they should laugh. The rest of us were busting out laughing, like hysterically laughing, just like, especially like the neighbor mowing the lawn and stopping when he sees this woman run across the lawn, and then all these kids running after him, or the people reacting, being like, they ran through the house. Look what they did to the lawn. Like totally unaware, just worried about the damage to the house, not totally unaware that these are, kids tearing a witch apart on their front lawn. Yeah. And then it turns out that these kids don't actually snap back. About it, months later, some of them start talking again. The parents never recover, apparently, from what we hear from the narration at the end of the film. And that's where the film ends. And then we end another needle drop here at the end. We have MGMT with Under the Porch. What is under the porch? Maybe her head? I don't know. Maybe it rolled under there. But that's the end of the film.
Yeah, so good. So at the start, they say the kids never come back.
Right.
And that's quite dark at the end because they find them, the kids are back. But when they say that some of them even start talking again, it's like, it is a tragedy. The kids never come back fully, which is horrible. But great film. But I just wanted to feel a bit more at the end. The way that the comedy just took over in the final, there was no kind of tragedy. The tragedy was gone. The comedy took over, and I didn't feel a rush out of the theater feeling like I saw something really substantial. But it was extremely entertaining and very well done.
Yeah, I think I almost wanted to give this 4 stars. I ended up giving it 3.5 because of my disappointment with how it could have been, like some of the critiques I made of how they could have tightened that up thematically. But I almost gave it 4 stars, even with those reservations, because I'm like, man, the experience of seeing this in the theater is really a thrilling. Like it's like seeing a great action movie or something. It is, a roller coaster ride for sickos is what I said on Letterboxd. But it really is, like this thing that, if you like these type of thrills, it really keeps you guessing and keeps you on your toes, and you are like glued to the screen. And that in and of itself is quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, I'm at 4 stars myself because I just want to see it again. And I just think just the way that it just rolled out the story was just so entertaining to me that, just the mystery was fantastic. And I just went along with it.
I wanted to dig into themes, but we can maybe do that another time, because maybe if you want to watch it again at some point, we can get into it when it becomes available on home video or whatever. But I did want to shout out one thing that I thought very interesting here, that another surprise massive hit from last year, not as popular as this one. This movie is going to be even more popular than the film I'm about to mention. But this film reminds me a lot of Longlegs, by the way, right? You have, missing creepy children. You have, an investigation, into what is cause of disappearance. In that case, it's officially like an FBI agent, but you have this investigation. You have this crazy clown-like character show up towards the end of the film who's manipulating everybody using some kind of magic or something. So, I mean, there's a lot of overlap. Oh, and of course, a very shocking and maybe divisive finale. That I think much less successful than this one, but I can't deny that there's a lot of overlap here. Now, by the way, they bought this script while they were making, while Barbarian was in theaters. So that's before Longlegs was out. So I'm not saying he's copying Longlegs here, but I just couldn't help but notice the parallels of 2 years in a row where there's a big surprise horror film in the summer that gets a lot of buzz, and they have a lot of shared DNA.
Absolutely. That did come to mind when I was watching it. And this is, I wasn't particularly enamored with Longlegs, so I think this is much more successful, whereas Longlegs was very stylistic to a fault.
Right.
It didn't really grab me, but I did see a preview for the next Osgood Perkins film before I saw Weapons, and it looked. It was a terrible preview. It was a terrible trailer. It looked like a commercial for like period products or something. I don't know what was going on. And I was like, is this a commercial? Is this a trailer? Osgood Perkins? All right, okay. I'm not on board the Osgood train just yet. I haven't seen The Monkey. I'm not quite sure.
The Monkey is, I would recommend you check out The Monkey because it is very comedic, very different tone than the kind of real sustained dread that he's really good at in Longlegs, until I think it doesn't work. I agree. I have very mixed feelings about Longlegs, but I love his tone management. So I do think that he is a very interesting, I think he has a lot of talent. I think from a scripting point of view, he needs help with the scripts even more so than I think that Zach Crager does. but these aren't other people who are writing their own scripts and making their own films. So I'm definitely on board. I'm curious to see what, but I feel exactly the same way with the trailer. The trailer is one of those things where it ticks off a lot of boxes that this could be really interesting. The Keeper film, that the trailer you're talking about, that is intriguing to me, but I agree. I'm like, what the hell is this movie? I'm not sure this is going to attract a large audience like his previous two films have.
Yeah, okay. But we're very lucky to have these filmmakers, I think, making original stories. I mean, bring it on. I can't wait for Jordan Peele's next.
Yeah, that's coming too.
Yeah. There is a film coming out called Him, which I know Jim Jeffries has a small role in, which is, they're calling it, Jordan Peele's on the poster, but I don't think he directs it.
No, he just produced, yeah.
Yeah. So
I've seen the trailer. Have you seen the trailer for that? That is a crazy.
Yeah, it looks cool.
That is a crazy looking trailer. So that also like more intriguing to me than Keeper was, but it is another one where I'm like, this could be really bad. But I guess we'll wait and see how it all plays out.
But yeah, it's so exciting seeing these films rather than, the next Conjuring, which I think is also coming out.
Oh, yeah. I saw the trailer too during this. And not as interested in that for sure. But yeah, like I said, I'm all for original horror or any, genre where people have, they're writing the scripts, these ideas are coming directly from their heads and they are shepherding them to the screen and they're successful. We saw Sinners earlier this year too. So like all for it. Let's have more of that. Even if I have critiques on some of these, but and my general opinion, I said the same thing when I saw Sinners as well. I feel like after you write the script, I think that, and go to another trusted filmmaker, like for example, PTA Anderson and Tarantino, read each other's scripts and work on them together after the first draft. I think get somebody, these very filmmakers, Jordan Peele and Osgood Perkins. Of course, he produced one of his most recent films, and also friends with Zach Crager here as well. Like I said, another polish on this script, and this would have been like a 5-star movie, I think.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, awesome. I shouldn't bring it up now because I got to leave, but I saw Together as well on the weekend. So I'm all up to date with these latest horror thriller films, and I really enjoyed Together. But if I had a choice, I'd watch Weapons again.
I like both of them very much, but Weapons is more of the it's the roller coaster ride for sure. So, all right, Darren,
fun. Awesome.
Thanks so much for the conversation. Sorry I made you late, but
that's all right. That's okay. Thanks so much, Victor. Looking forward to Alien Earth.
Yep, we'll touch base later this week. Great. Thanks.
Okay. Cheers.
Bye.